But then you get super advances in technology, and this is what's just happened recently, is supercapacitors. And supercapacitor is like a beautiful thing. Inside of every kind of device there's a thing called a capacitor, and the capacitor stores energy for a short period of time.
In our laptops, in our phones.
Yeah, laptops, in most devices, so anything that you've got any retained current. So like when you most people have had this advice before.
Right.
So when they're having a problem with an electronic device, they say unplug it.
Yes.
And leave it off for like 10 seconds.
And everybody wonders why.
Like why? Like why must I do this?
Why can't we just put it on after 1 second, because we're impatient people, you know?
And it's just allowing the internal circuitry and the capacitors to discharge.
Capacitors, that's
right. And so it comes in various different forms, and mainly used in inverters and that kind of stuff. Anyway, they're a useful thing. And for a long time it's been rumored that the ability, the disadvantage that you always had with capacitors was you could never keep the current that you put in it. Right. And of course the volume of storage that was available on any capacitor.
So capacitors discharge the current very quickly.
So they take current really quickly, and they discharge current really quickly.
Which is the characteristics of a capacitor as far as we knew so far. And that's what capacitors did, and that's how engineers used them.
Yeah.
But something's changed now, right?
Yes, right. So now they basically went and they did carbon nanotube technology, and they applied it to these supercapacitors. And basically what they've been able to do is they've been able to take a capacitor, and they've been able to increase, first of all, the volume and amount of energy that it could take. Now a capacitor, various different sizes of capacitor, could always take a lot of energy, but they were never able to keep it for a long time. So now you can keep the energy on a supercapacitor from anything between 1 kilowatt hour, 50 megawatt, you're able to keep for up to 14 days.
Right.
And that's seriously
14 days instead of 10 seconds.
Instead of even less than 10 seconds in some cases, but yes. So all of a sudden now you have a device that people would have loved to, for many years, everybody wanted to use a supercapacitor for some storage.
Right.
But the ability to, it just was too fast, it was too transient. You couldn't make it, no matter what you did, you couldn't keep the power there long enough.
So a capacitor now is more like what we'd previously call a battery.
Yes, right. So that's what we call them now. We call them supercapacitor batteries.
Right. But batteries the traditional batteries have disadvantages that capacitors don't have.
Of course, yes.
What are they?
So with any battery you have a thing called an electrolyte. Electrolyte is like the medium, the gel or the lead acid that they use.
Lithium?
Well, lithium as well, although lithium is slightly in a different class to your typical types of energy. But the negative components that are associated with this is that there's generally a build-up, so on the plate, so in the terms of when you recharge and discharge, and over time, the battery, it ceases to be able to absorb charge as well. And it ceases to be able to give up charge as well.
Can you clean them? Can you improve them?
You can, in some cases, you can. But if you understand that, you can get a maximum lifespan out of, any kind of plate. The buildup is so intense. I mean, it punctures little holes in it. It's finished after a period of time.
As we know from our cell phones and our laptop.
Well, in that case, that's a lithium. So in that case, generally there's swelling on it, and the efficiency, so the overall ability for it to store power and release power, that becomes compromised over time.
Right.
The benefit that people have of lithium, for argument's sake, is that its energy density is much higher. So
compared to, say, a car battery.
Yeah, much more.
Much more.
But also it has the benefit that you're able to cycle it a lot deeper. So you're able to use more of a lithium battery than you are, for argument's sake.
Cycle it deeper?
Cycle. So every battery is rated on the number of cycles.
Recharge.
Right, so it's a full discharge normally.
Right.
And you rate a battery, every battery has a thing called a DOD, which is a depth of depletion, versus cycle life characteristics.
Right.
And this is how we assess generally a battery.
Right.
And so you will see it will have, if you've got a 100 amp battery, for argument's sake, and you use 50%, that's called a 50% DOD. Depth of depletion means you're using half of the battery, and if you cycle that on a daily basis, it will tell you how many cycles you can get off that. Maybe you can get 1,000 cycles, maybe you can get 500 cycles.
Right.
But a cycle is, you know, generally you can use it in a year or whatever. You'll use up a little lead acid battery or 2 years.
Well, like a car battery.
Or like car battery. So a car battery, you know, because you're not using the full volume of a car batteries last longer.
Ah.
But under renewable energy applications, you're using that battery generally on a day-to-day basis.
So you fully deplete it?
Well, not fully, never fully, but down to half or 30%.
Okay.
And then you're putting it back up, and half and 30%. You could fully deplete it, but then, you know, so the more you deplete it, the shorter the lifespan of the battery.
Okay.
So people generally try what we call shallow cycle. You impact as low on the battery as possible.
Okay.
To get the maximum possible lifespan of the battery. And this is true of all technologies, whether it's lead acid, whether it's gel, AGM, lithium, it makes no difference.
Right.
That applies to those concepts, because obviously there's a mechanical process that's taking, a chemical process, it's taking place inside of the battery.
Right.
It is decreasing its lifespan based on the way that you're using.
So the number of cycles, very, very roughly off the top of your head, for a kind of car battery or a lithium-ion battery would be...
So on a car battery, you'll do anything between a car battery is different, so forget car battery. A car battery is like a cranking battery. It's designed to give up power fast and take charge fast. But in any renewable or energy electrical storage, you use what's called a deep cycle battery.
Right.
So a deep cycle battery is designed that it can be recharged and discharged more.
Right, because with a car battery, it's quick, and then you use it, and you don't really use it after that.
Yeah, and it's got to yield up a lot. It's got to give up a lot of power very fast.
Right. With a laptop battery or a cell phone battery,
right, so
you're using it all the time. You're not
that's
just
right.
using it for a minute.
So it's over a period. So your impact on it is less.
Right. Okay.
So, but at the same time, normally what you'll get is about 1 to 3 years off your cheap lead acid batteries.
1 to 2, and how many cycles is that?
Well, you know, it's using it every day.
Okay.
So if you take a 100 amp deep cycle battery, you use your 50% 50 amps per day, recharge it 50 amps per day.
Right.
You know, you will get roughly about a year to a year and a half. Max push, you'll get about 2.5 years off.
Right.
That's what happens.
And a laptop battery?
A laptop battery is a lithium cell, so you'll get a lot more out of a laptop battery. A laptop battery or cell phone battery, you'll get a lot more out of them. If you charge them properly and take care of them properly, those batteries can last you anything up to 12 years. Lithium is like that. Lithium is a good technology like that.
Okay.
And then you get more advanced lead acid technology, which will last you between 2.5 to say 5 years or 4 years. And these are all your kind of, your American class Trojan batteries, good, well designed. They're specifically focused for like renewable energy applications, and they're good batteries.
Okay. So now we come to capacitors.
Right.
How do they compare with?
Right. So I did a really cool calculation. Anyway, so this guy, I had this comment on our Facebook site, and the guy was saying, okay, and so I'm trying to compare, the differences. So I said, well, that's no problem, man. He says, yeah, it's not viable to go solar because you've got to change batteries. So, and the batteries, even the best batteries, only going to last you 12 years.
Okay.
And now, first of all, you got the concept wrong. I'm not trying to supply a battery system for the national grid.
Right.
I'm trying to supply a massive grid feed system, and generally there is no storage. Generally you're just supplying the grid. But I said, but even if there was to be a battery, and we were to do it, and we used a supercapacitor as a battery, our battery would last 1,395 years.
Oh, really? That's quite a long time.
Sure. I mean, God no. I mean, it's
that
crazy.
takes us back to about Anglo-Saxon times. That was before the Norman ways.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So I mean, and it just puts you in perspective in terms. Now look, the characteristics of usage of a supercapacitor are obviously different to a battery, but it gets you 500,000 cycles.
500,000. So like your cell phone, it's cycling every day, right? Your laptop probably every day.
Right.
So that's 500,000.
Right. So on a lead acid battery,
days.
For argument's sake, you get maybe 1,500 cycles.
Right.
So that's cycled in, or maybe 1,000 cycles. I'll call it. Okay, your best one. Okay, 1,000 cycles. So that's roughly 3 years.
Right.
That you got on that battery.
Okay. So it just doesn't have the same kind of chemical, because it's not chemical.
It's not chemical, and it's got no internal resistance.
Okay.
because there is no chemical. It's not trying to. It just takes everything you've got to give it. Its ability to charge
Right.
is it's every like in a normal battery system. You first got to like heat up. You've got to warm up the battery, and it takes a while. It goes through various states of charge before it actually starts to absorb charge. Before it gets to the bulk stage of charge.
Right.
And
This is with what?
this is normal, traditional kind of battery or storage.
Lithium ion?
Lithium ion, very similar. I mean, lithium ion takes power faster, but it's still the same principle.
Right.
It's a different kind of charging algorithm, but it's still a charge, and
Right.
it takes time to charge.
And there's something changing chemically in these batteries.
Yeah, of course, there is.
But
Has
with
to
a
be
charge or
chemical,
not?
chemical alteration.
With a capacitor or not?
But with the capacitor, it's zero. So there's zero internal resistance. So that means that the same amount of time. So if you use 10 kilowatt and you put 10 kilowatt onto it, it will absorb that instantaneously, almost practically. So your charge time is like basically disappeared.
Right.
It's like ludicrous.
And these things are commercially available now.
Commercially available, yes.
And the cost of these compared to traditional batteries?
So they're slightly more expensive, about 35% more expensive.
Which for 500,000 charges is not that.
Right, so I
Fair charge.
I said to a lot of the engineers, like some people that we spoke to, I said to a lot of them, I said, listen, man, it will outlast us.
Yeah.
You'll put in a battery in an application, we won't be around to see the end of that battery. And that is just the reality of it. But the real excitement of this, look, it's an emerging, brand new technology. One company so far in the world has cracked this technology, and this technology is now available here in South Africa.
And as you've seen it work?
It functions in Dubai.
You personally?
No, I've obviously not. It's a new technology.
Okay, it's coming now.
Right, but anyway, all over the world there are functioning sites where people fly out to, they see it, fall over and cry about why they never thought of it. And, honestly, I'm telling you. But the functional reality of it is this.
Right.
Is that we don't yet really understand, I don't really yet understand how to apply it yet to a renewable system.
Okay.
But if you think about the implications of what it does, forgetting renewable energy just for a moment, and you take a look at a coal-fired power station,
right,
a nuclear power station, and you start storing your energy on a massive capacity.
Now you mentioned earlier there's not much storage at the moment. People just produce for the grid, and when it's too much, they actually disengage the plates.
Correct.
So it's just a huge waste.
It's a huge waste.
So there's all that energy, there's all that
But
heat
also remember,
that's not being converted into.
A lot of the load shedding that we experienced last year was due to them shutting down plants for maintenance.
Right.
So the actual grid took impact. They overstretched when they shut down plants because maintenance had to be performed. People got shut down all over the country.
Okay.
Now you place a supercapacitor into that mix, and all of a sudden you can store up to 14 days on your system. You can shut down your plant, go have a beer, play a game of golf, come back, and it's the best part is you can put the power back into that. So when it does come back on, it will instantaneously pick up your output again. It will charge itself in minutes.
Right.
It's ludicrous.
So in other words, we can take these plants which are producing and then being disengaged and run them 100% of the time, or
yes,
something like that, and store all the power, and
right,
then we won't need to build all these extra power stations.
Right. Or you could just use it to take care of your peaks. So where you are now basically peaking out and then dropping down, you've got an average that is in operation. So if you could have a capacitor that just took care of your peaks, it means that your turbines would only ever have to stay at the average. They wouldn't need to climb up for the peak because your capacitor could take care of all the peaks.
Right.
So all of the hills and anything that might come in between, any sporadic kind of.
So with our existing old style coal-fired fossil fuel thing, we can use them far more efficiently.
Far more efficient.
So we don't need to produce any more. China's producing one a week or something.
Yeah, I heard that. I've actually heard that before, but I'd like to see the write-up on that.
Okay, I've never researched.
The only reason is because it takes between 5 to 10 years to produce.
Yeah.
China has recently, they've just put. First of all, China has more wind power than all of Europe and United States put together.
Wow.
I mean, it's immense, man. In terms of solar PV, they're talking about knocking out, I think, close on 15% of their grid completely.
15.
15, but understand this is China. We're not
Yeah.
talking about little South Africa. I mean,
Yeah, it's not a small grid.
Yeah, 2% of their grid is like our entire power consumption, kind of thing. You know,
Yeah.
those aren't real figures, but.
Yeah.
But anyway, so just to kind of focus on the thing. Now, if you take a look at nuclear power, coal fire, any of those kind of power technologies, you know, they're generally, you know, rather inefficient. And the basis for keeping them was operating on the principle that there wasn't another technology that could supply a base load, a persistent power. When you walk to your wall, you turn on a switch, it must work. You know?
Yeah.
Big industry, when they're operating, they can't say, oh shit, the sun's gone down, we no longer, you know, we got to switch off.
Right.
And they traded on this for a long period of time, and this is how they function. But
Right.
if you take a renewable energy system, be it photovoltaic, wind, wave, whatever you want,
Right.
and you apply it to a couple of 50 megawatt capacitors, all of a sudden you are able to take all the power that they output. If in one part of the country there's no wind, in another part there's sun, you know,
Right.
and you're able to store all this and deploy it back to grid. You've got parity in terms of being able to make a stable baseload, a stable grid.
Right.
And so the proposition, the opportunity for renewable energy to completely supplant kind of fossil fuel driven kind of energy sources, it's here, it's really here.
Because the storage solves the baseload problem.
The storage solves the baseload problem. But even if supercapacitors never existed,
Okay.
even if they weren't around, you with sufficient focus on any concept, bearing in mind that the principle here is to heat something. That's it, man. I mean, it's just to heat
Heating
something
steam.
up.
Heating
You
water
want
to make
heat
steam.
something up. So if you completely got rid of the concept of a supercapacitor, and let's say in every province you dug a massive hole, just as an argument, you fill that massive hole with cement, and you know, you had a water source exactly like a coal fire plant does, and you attach that to turbines, and that just sat there, and all the output that you created from any wind source or any solar source or anything, it just plummeted into this massive heat store.
Right.
So every time the grid couldn't take it, the plants were producing, say in this case 100 megawatt, but the grid's only using 80 megawatt, then that extra 20 megawatt just shoveled into this heat store. And this happens all over.
Can you keep the heat hot by insulation?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, those are thermal characteristics. But I mean, you know, if you think about it, if you're able to do it with a salt, with a improved degree of efficiency, and overly complex, I mean, it goes through some, actually I said it goes through like a phase change. You know, they are playing with the basic kind of atomic structure of their storage medium, just to get a desired result.
And there's simpler ways to do it.
But if you think about it, I mean, take a look at something like a mountain, you know, so there we have a thing here, it's called a bergwind, and the bergwind comes because the mountains are heated, you know, like they get heated up during the day and the wind from the mountain brings the heat, and at night, you can be sitting outside at night and it's beautiful and warm. All you're talking about is heating something.
Right.
And so by the more concentration that you put on that object, the more heat that you develop in that object, it retains it to a certain degree, and you can improve the efficiency of that retention of heat. You can do this,
Right.
and it's not. I mean, it's not. I mean, we came up with some crazy concepts. You know, keep a gap separating it and keep it like hovering on magnetic levitators. But the principle of everything remains the same. It is a basic mechanical truth of anything. If you heat something up, it has a time that it will retain that heat, and if you insulate it, that time will remain longer.
Right.
And if you run water through it and it's hot enough, water boils, and as long as you have enough pressure coming through and enough heat inside of it, you can drive a steam turbine, and that's exactly what they're doing. And that
In every case.
in every case, it's a basic mechanical truth. And so when we come back to the concepts of why we do things so overly complex, they can actually be simple. They can be simple, but they're not.
Okay, the trees here, we collect the seeds in the rivers, mainly along the Berg River, where the Berg River is so polluted. And we start right up at source at Assegai-Bos, collecting seeds of the indigenous breeder crew of yellowwoods and all the other indigenous plants and bushes and grasses and things that filter the water. And we did 16,500 trees last year, over 14,500 this year. We've got another probably 7,000 still to plant this year as well, of all different types that are indigenous ones. So once Land of Agriculture gets in and moves all the aliens, then we go in afterwards and plant the indigenous stuff behind them. Reforest, increase biodiversity, clean the water, get more habitats, so it increases all the species, not just the bar. Well, what's happening, the Berg River now is so polluted that the United Nations have threatened that they will ban all fruit irrigated from the Berg River below Paarl. That's how bad the pollution is, gets into the fruit. There we're looking at hundreds of thousands of jobs, billions of rands in exports, so it's a massive, massive problem. Provincial government is working very hard on it, Department of Agriculture is working very hard on it, but there's a time limit where the cut-off has to come. We have to fix the river. No, the farmers are getting into this very much. Of course, there is still sprays, but it's far better controlled. They're doing a lot of aerial spray now, but the helicopters or the planes all work on GPS points now, so there's very little sort of wafting of the spray. It's very specific how they spray it now. It's actually quite professional. And some of the insecticides they're using now are much, much better than they were 5 years ago. Most of the spraying is against fruit fly. Not that we know of, no. No. Not on that sort of scale. It's come a lot better. When we came here 30 years ago, it was much, much worse. There was no helmets on the tractors. Nowadays the tractors are closed, they've got filters on them, the guys have masks, and of course the chemicals are far more better and not as harmful as they were 30 years ago. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's got much more specific now aerial spraying, in that you don't get that wind waft. They spray, we hear them here, the sunrise, normally when there's no wind around, and they're very, very specific. You can watch the sprays only on that orchard. Drifting used to be a major problem before, but it's much better controlled. It's still a little bit, it's not, yeah, but here it's quite specific. But not everybody can afford to have that kind of equipment. Today, arriving this afternoon, is 27 people from Cape Town University that are here to study the water. They're going to open a research station in the old sewage works down the road. Quite a fantastic project that. That's with Professor Kevin Winter. The facility being an old sewage works and right on the tributaries to the Berg is an absolute perfect research station. That particular department at Cape Town University has been working on this river for years now, so they've got a long track record of how the pollution has increased. A lot of it it's not just spray. The effects of spray are getting better and better. I mean, it obviously still is an effect, but the biggest problem now is we've got very good road engineers who make fantastic stormwater drains, and a lot of the sewage works or sewage pipes in the squatter camps are broken. So all the effluent goes straight into the stormwater drains and straight to the river. It just bypasses the sewage works completely. So that's the biggest pollution problem is coming out of settlements. There's various initiatives going on by Western Cape government, some quite brilliant ones, using biomimicry and that sort of thing. And that's working. It's an experiment now, but it seems to be working. We can go up there and have a look if you want. Well, we don't spray here at all. So we stopped farming here about 10 years ago because of the sprays we had to use. So it's been totally organic now for over 10 years. The only thing we spray here is garlic and chilies. So, well, there's enough here for everybody.
Exactly.
There's enough here for the caterpillars. The chickens eat the caterpillars. So it's, there's plenty for everybody here. Very possible.
It's possible.
It's very possible, yeah. It's proving in a lot of areas. Department of Agriculture are doing quite a initiative with the wheat farmers, where they're not burning and spraying so much, they're leaving all the biomass in the ground and their crops are increasing at far less expense. So it's definitely possible. There are ways. There is a major problem with bees in South Africa at the moment. We've lost over 40% of that, but that's due to a fungus hitting the larva of the bee in the hives, so the actual larva does not mature. No, not with the 18 hives we've got here and the fact that we're organic. We get more pollination than we can actually use. Yeah, we're growing things all the year around here, so it's not a problem. Yeah, we actually plant for the bees. We deliberately plant in winter stuff that the bees can eat, so we make sure they've got food all around.
Okay.
We've had quite a long discussions with the road department, trying to get them to stop cutting the road verges. and they've sort of come back with various answers to us. So what we now have to do is, even if they cut it 400 mil off the ground, that'll still give the fakies and all the other things for the bees to eat. But if you add up the millions of hectares of road verges that could become bee fodder, I think that's one of the answers we must look at is, stop cutting the road verges. There's enough fodder there to keep the bees busy, plenty of them. Yeah, that is a thing, and also we've discussed that a lot with the Department of Agriculture, the way they take the aliens out of the riverbeds. They just flatten everything. I'll show you down here how we do it. We plant the indigenous, and we just do this with the aliens. So we use the alien plants as the pioneer plants, plant all the indigenous stuff, and then as the indigenous stuff grows, we take out the aliens. Some of the other methods, they go and they flatten everything. They bring in DT bulldozers, which weigh tons. I don't know what the effects of that's on the biomass and everything living in the soil, but it must be radical. So we're doing it a different way to a lot of the but it's a cost factor. To go in and clear things like on the Berg River, it definitely is the most cost effective. So rather they're doing something and we get in afterwards and plant the indigenous trees than do absolutely nothing. But the whole idea, the way we do it, is that it gives the bees and all the insects time to adapt from gum to the natural stuff. If you take out the gum completely, a lot of the bees have adapted only to gum, or eucalyptus or various other indigenous trees. So it's a matter of how one does it. No, the whole idea of getting the indigenous plants is to stop the erosion, because a lot of the gums and pines and things, they suck up a huge amount of water, and their root system is not as good for anti-erosion as a lot of the indigenous stuff. They're indigenous, so what we do, we literally find the very few trees that are still here, indigenous trees, and we go at the right time of year, depending on the species, collect the seeds and then replant them back in the same area where we picked them up, because a lot of these rivers have been devastated. So sometimes it's very difficult for us to find trees in certain areas, but we do find them now and then, and from one tree we can get 3,000-4,000 seedlings off it. So. No, we picked them in the wild.
You picked them.
Yeah, we actually got permission from Cape Nature.
What about?
We do, but we only use heirloom seed. No, not really. We order them over internet, or we've got various contacts in Cape Town and around the country where we get them from, friends, people like that. We grow a lot of our own heirloom seeds here now. No, I think let's go around, and I'm certainly not an expert in everything, but I can show you around.
Communicating, and what I love is the fact that you're taking the seeds from the situs, from the same area, and you're putting them back. So it's like bringing them back into the family. And trees talk, don't they?
I'm convinced trees communicate. They definitely do. I mean, there's no question. If giraffes are eating acacia there, all the acacia trees around start putting out a bitterness to stop the giraffe eating them. So you see the giraffe eat here, and then he goes right over there to eat, because these ones have already put out a bitter flavor into their leaves. So there's a communication. How it works, I don't know. But I don't know how cell phones talk to each other. So, there's a lot of communications out there we don't know. But I'm 100% convinced trees communicate.
We're going to see that today if we can.
Yeah, I've tied up today because all the universities stuff.
You're not in agreement about the spraying, you're just saying that it has improved.
Yeah, no, I've got an agreement with it.
But
No, one of the worst sprays that we used to experience, but I haven't seen it much lately, is a thing called winter oil. And basically what they did, it was sprayed on the trees as they started to bud, and it literally suffocated everything. So the buds that were starting were suffocated, so the other buds internally could get up to the same sort of level of budding, and it had a certain sort of lifespan, and then when it left they would all bud together. So it saved the farmers a lot of money, because they could then pick once or twice instead of 3 or 4 times as it budded naturally. So it was done for that, but that killed everything. I mean, insects, everything. It was terrible stuff. But as I say, I haven't seen it used for a while, not in this area anyway.
Thank you.
At least in the last 15 years, all the chemicals, including herbicides, have an adjuvant, which is designed to make the chemicals stick to whatever. They stick to everything. So people everywhere has, instead of before where it would disperse, it now sticks. And so I think that's why everybody's getting more sick these days than before, and I've heard that they use aluminium. So the air is full of aluminium, and already our water supply has alum in it. So there's just an oversupply of aluminium. Growing problem. Yeah. So that's why people have chest problems and dermatitis, and because it's just sticking to everything. And our water supply in Stellenbosch always smells and tastes like whatever is being sprayed at. Could be like in the winter it smells like herbicide, in the summer it smells and tastes like insecticide. So whatever's being sprayed is getting in the water somehow or other.
Natural trees that grow naturally in the rivers and that we propagate from seed and put back in the rivers. In these beds here we've got 46,000 seedlings which are going to go into about 32 schools, biosphere reserve, and the rest get planted into settlements and various other private homes for food security. All of these trays are filled with vegetables.
Wow, okay.
So
Amazing.
we go in every week. We've got a team going into various communities, distributing seedlings, setting up the gardens, teaching people how to make compost, that sort of thing. All vegetables, yeah. These are just flowers for somebody wanting to plant them, one of the volunteers. And then once they get to a certain size, we then prick them out, put them into, here's a lot of these. You'll see that must be 6 or 8 in one plug. These are 220 plug trays. So all this gets planted out, given away. We don't sell anything. Those have come up in the last 24 hours. You must know these.
No?
And keyhole gardens with a compost heap in the middle.
Oh, I love it. Explain it.
Well, basically what it is, it's a raised bed. So we put sticks and cardboard and anything underneath. Here's a compost heap in the middle. So you don't have to fertilize it, it just leaches out from the compost. And we've put a lot of these into, old age homes, informal settlements, things like that. They work for two reasons. People that can't bend down, it's easy for them to garden. It's self-generating. And in a lot of the areas they've got pigs, so they can't have gardens. It's fantastic. You put them in, and it's all made from alien timber. It's taken out where the aliens have been cleared out of the rivers. And you can easily feed a family off this. I mean, this has now just been revamped, but we had them where we put the overhead gardens. You pick pumpkins here, and hold back there was tomatoes and climbing plants and beans. But when we finish the centre at Stellenbosch, there'll be a whole example of all of this. So we bus the communities in and take them there for a whole day, and they learn, and everything's done with recycled materials, so it costs nothing.
So these are some of the alien.
Yeah, just alien things.
Taken out
Often,
and-
municipalities always chopping down things, so everything we use is, we make it in such a way that anybody can do it, no matter what their financial incomes are.
Cost of
All of the stuff here we
vegetables
give
and
away.
seedlings is really expensive. So if they couldn't, how would they get a supply of that?
Just phone us. All of this stuff here, we've got people, volunteers just planting all the time. So we've normally got between 30 and 40,000 seedlings in stock all the time.
Wow.
So it's done through volunteers and things like that, and we propagate a lot of our own seeds, so it doesn't cost us much. Everything's reused, yeah.
And where do the volunteers come from? The local community?
Local communities, beauty of having Jan Marais is right in the middle of the university, so we've got about 150 students signed up as volunteers, and then we get volunteers from Luxembourg. They come here for 6 months at a time, and normally we've got at least 2 or 3 of them, and then we get interns and woofers, and so it's all done on a shoestring.
Sculptures?
Yeah, that's just a friend of mine. They do the molds, and then of course they make the bronze things. So I just take his original one. Yeah, the only pesticide we use here, we grow the chilies and we grow the garlic, There's the chilies you can see there. Here's the wild garlic, things like that. We put that in a liquidizer. We then filter it and put it into a back spray, and we spray that. That's the only thing we spray here. We do. I mean, you'll see some of them eating it. Chickens are the worst. They come and eat the bugs and eat everything else as well. We just plant enough for everybody. So we've always got a supply. All our staff virtually feed off this garden as well. And the bugs also eat it. So we're really not worried if there's two. But it'll just reduce it. Oh yeah, we see it especially in the ECD schools, which we supply from this garden as well. Those kids are definitely, you could see a change after 5 or 6 months. They were definitely healthier, there's no question of that. Because they were literally living on rice on Monday, pasta on Tuesday, samp. They got no minerals or vitamins in their diet or meat at all. So if we deliver, in summer when it's really flourishing here, we deliver between 80 and 120 kilos a week. So that's definitely adds to their diet. Oh, I've never really measured it out, but it's quite, I'll show you up, it goes right up past the red bus there. Yeah, probably a bit more.
Okay.
Probably a bit more, because we literally, between the pear trees, that's where we plant. So every piece of ground's used. We haven't taken the pear trees out to make a vegetable garden. They're planted 4 meters apart, so we've got 3 meter vegetable gardens right up through the pear orchard. Everything grows together.
Yes, and that's just what it should be. Just utilizing the land, utilizing what is around, and what I love is his principle of sharing and giving of his knowledge and giving of the seeds and passing them on. I think that's just extraordinary, and he's a man of the times, really.
Yeah, the other thing we're researching now is a centrifugal toilet which was developed in Sweden. It's been around for quite a few years, and they use them on all the road stops going through Sweden, and they've about 4 or 5 times more people using them than they expected, and they're still working fine. At the Eden project, they've got one that handles 72,000 people a year, and it's very simple. It looks like an hourglass, and you use a normal flushing toilet, because a lot of people in this country don't want dry toilets, they want what everybody else has got. And so basically the flush toilet, all the effluent goes into this thing, and just straight, and the spin, it separates the solids from the liquids. So the liquids will go into our tree nurseries, and the solids go into a thing below with worms, and it turns into fertilizer. So no sewage leaves that property at all. So one of the projects we're working on now is to go into informal settlements and split them into areas, because at the moment to put these sort of things in, these need no maintenance at all, they've got no moving parts. But we're trying to split the areas into, say, 100 houses, put them through one of these systems, put a nursery and a recycling unit in between those 100 houses, and that will then go to produce. We'll put a nursery there too, and then we will then buy the trees back from the community and replant them in the rivers. So it's win-win both ways. The banana circle, what a banana circle is, it really is just a round pit. You dig a pit. We've got this one lined because we're experimenting with not just with grey water but with human waste as well. So we dug this pit about 2 meters wide, 1.5 meters deep, and we lined it so it is waterproof, so nothing can get into the soil because we're quite close to the river. We then piped that into a Jojo tank, but there's about 8 people using this toilet every day, and nothing ever has gone into the Zozo tank. So what we did, we put about 1 kilo of worms in it first, and then we covered it with soil, and when we planted things like Phragmites, reeds, bananas and things like that, so that sucks up all the liquids, and the worms eat all the solids. And we've had that down now for about 1.5 years, and it's working perfectly. Now that's why it's lined. And the University of Cape Town is keeping a beady eye, and they're quite interested to see how it works. So it's very nice to have a university watching it, and if it does, if we can prove the concept and scientifically prove it, then we'll see how we can roll it out in other areas. Not just one, because through the biosphere reserves, we're in 121 countries, about 760 biospheres worldwide, and we've now got 8 in South Africa. So we've got very, very strong connections with tertiary institutions and a whole lot of other specialized institutions worldwide. So when we do experiments, we've really got the backing, and anything new we try, obviously we need to test for 2, 3, 4 years, depending on what the projects are. And we obviously need a university or some specialized institution to verify what we're doing technically, to get the technical papers out there. So it's not just a bunch of tree huggers trying to do something, it's technically proven. So, and then we can convince, say, municipalities that this is not a dangerous thing and there's no leakage into the rivers, that type of thing. But without having that relationship with universities, it's just talk. We've had a lot of discussions, and we work very closely with municipalities, and they definitely do care. It's just that the processes take so long. I mean, you take our sewage works in Franschhoek. The one that was designed now was probably designed 12 years ago. It takes a whole lot of time to get the funding, and then to get the tenders out to build it, and in that 10 or 12 years to get that process through, certain communities
still
have
not got it?
bludgeoned. No, we've got a new one here, but if you take that time, it's already undercapacitated. You know, so it's not that they don't care. In fact, there are some very good people working in the municipalities that are very caring, but it's the red tape and the whole processes they've got to go through to get things implemented in time. And you get a town like Franschhoek, it's designed for Franschhoek residents, for the size of the town, with probably a 20-year expansion plan behind it. And then we get festivals like Bastille Festival, bring in another 60,000 people and just can't cope, so it goes straight over the top into the rivers. So it's all this sort of planning that happens, and bludgeoning communities which were never planned for. Houses or properties that are supposed to have 4 people on have now got 20 on. So sewage is the biggest problem, there's no question. No, it works well.
And there's some ones coming into the reed bed here. Is that what?
No,
including
not
that,
from
or
our
is it
houses, so
including-
those go through different systems, no, but not into this dam. Yeah, come here at night, you can hardly talk. That these farmers are making a living, it's their living, it's their business. And if a spray is legal, it should have been tested by the authorities. You know, our eyes were tested by universities, and I think where the fault lies, if it's damaging, it should be made illegal. So there's something wrong with the legislation, not necessarily the farmers themselves. So it's where the trouble should lie. But you've got very powerful companies like Monsanto and these things. I mean, they're always in court for something. So yeah, this thatch is just coming. Came with that house thatch. That's from old straw. It's mixed with cow manure. They run around all day. No, they choose where they want to lay. On our bed, even in the chair in the office, there's one every day. And in the top of the bus, the other one's laying. So they lay where they want. There's a chair in the office where the dog's allowed to sit. And when the chicken wants to lay on the chair, it chases the dog off, lays the egg, and then the dog can come back.
And does the dog lie on the egg then?
No, if it gets there, he'll eat it before we get to it, so we got to watch it.
Yesterday I released a document that was in relation to there was a news article came out that the minister was basically trying to play down the cost of solar power. They said that the solar power plants were costing them between 50 and 62 billion over the course of his 20-year contract. And as a result it was too expensive, and therefore South Africa was using it to justify the need to move over to nuclear. And there's a whole lot of back-end politics that goes in with that. Anybody that's in the renewable energy industry knows that it's an absolute load of rubbish, because a solar plant, and in this case they're referring to a 100 megawatt solar plant, for us to build a 100 megawatt solar plant costs us roughly 2 billion rand, and therefore it makes no sense as to why you would enter into a contract for 60 billion when the actual cost of the plant is 2 billion, and it makes its power from the sun exactly the same way that these people are going to be doing it. So why wouldn't local municipalities, Eskom, etc., whoever, why wouldn't they just build their own plant and pay some people for maintenance, and that's it? And then it wouldn't cost them 60 billion rand, because ultimately renewable, what I proved inside that letter, is a far cheaper form of power. And then in addition to it, I brought into the environmental benefits in terms of the amount of charcoal that is used by coal fire, the amount of water that is used by coal fire, 1.32 litres of water per kilowatt hour of energy, 1.32 litres, ludicrous. 1 kilogram of coal burned for 1 kilowatt of energy, 1 kilowatt hour of energy. I mean, it's absolute madness. So then I went on to nuclear, and I just explained the whole process of uranium and the cost, the CO2 costs that are associated with it. And I summarized basically by offering to show them supporting documentation that proves how much a solar plant costs on a cost sale basis on that scale, which is 100 megawatts. And at the end of the day, we're being completely misled. This has become a political tossing ground. What they're really trying to do is they have an intention, a small group of people have an intention to try and go with a beneficial kind of contract system where other people are making astronomical amounts of money that is costing us, the taxpayer, and also the consumer of that power. We are having to pay for this, and for no reason. And they're misleading us as to why they are doing that, and that's what that document is about.
My name is Nobile Ngosi from the Northwest University Climatology Research Group and South African Climate Change Coalition.
What does that do, that climate change group?
Our climate research group, we go around in the community and then we find problems that are related to climate change, like air quality. I'm specifically concerned about air quality, and then we take measurement, and when we measure how much emissions emitted from domestic burning, so that we can know like how much content, and then can try to present that in the form of a document, and then we report it to the government. So like we can tell them something is wrong. This amount of people are dying every year because of air pollution, so we need to do something about it.
Do you have any success with them doing anything about it?
Yes, there's been interventions in the low-income settlement in Kwadela, the township in Mpumalanga, whereby there's like thermal insulations and then changing of the stoves, and then teaching people about how to burn efficiently so that to reduce the emissions.
How to bake efficiently?
How to burn.
Burn efficiently?
Yes.
Do you feel that burning is still necessary?
People in low-income residential areas actually don't have much money to buy electricity. Even if they do have money, it runs out before the month ends, so they feel like coal is cheaper, and then so they burn coal instead of burning electricity.
But electricity at the moment is from coal anyway, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
But then the emissions now are occurring at a local level, but it affects them.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the problem.
Do you think it's important that the coal should affect anybody at all?
No. Actually, I think we should move from fossil or solid fuel burning and move to renewable or natural sources of energy like the sun. We need to move to hydropower and wind. So,
if you had some advice to give the government from the things that you've been seeing, what would you, if you were the number one person in the government and you could choose what you asked people to do, or what you got the country to do, what would you like to see if you had indefinite money?
okay, I have two things. The first thing, I would actually like them to integrate education, like the curriculum education, with the environmental studies, so that they can actually, when the kids grow, they actually have a background of environmental issues and stuff, and then to inspire them and to spark that climate activist in them, so that they actually know when they do something there's an effect. Okay, secondly, I would actually like the government to actually do something about the emissions from low-income residential areas, because it's really bad. And yeah.
So typically, how much would you say of the people in townships are utilizing electricity?
Okay, there is access to electricity, but then with load shedding, and then the price of electricity going up every year, people actually can't afford it. According to Dr. Mluli, 80% of the population in low-income residential areas still use solid fuels, even with access to electricity, because they can't afford it. So the access doesn't change much. It changes, but it doesn't change much. So we actually need to remove the need to burn solid fuels.
That's a very good statement that you made there.
Yeah.
Can you just outline one more time, if you're, in order to stop the problem that your group are encountering now?
Yes.
it is a very serious problem. What sort of side effects, first of all, would you?
Oh my God, there's environmental side effects, and then there's health. That's like the center of the problem. Like people, children, especially children and elders, they're actually vulnerable to air pollution related disease because they are the ones that, the women are the ones that cook, so they're always in the kitchen, so they're exposed to these emissions. The children are always in the kitchen ready to get dinner, so they're always exposed. And then their physiology, they actually breathe in much faster than adults, so they're actually very much vulnerable to air pollution related diseases. According to, is it David? Yes, like 2,000 children die every year in South Africa due to air pollution related diseases, so it's bad. And then the environmental issues, we have ambient air quality is poor, and then you're gonna have fog, and then there's like environmental issues. It's really bad.
What kind of diseases are caused by air pollution?
We have asthma, and then you have cardiovascular related diseases, and then you have the respiratory related, and then sinuses, and then they increase like the effect of maybe cancer, and it just goes extreme. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to say? If you,
Yes.
you're now talking to like potentially millions of people, what would you like to say to the rest of the world out there who are watching what everybody who can do something is doing on the ground? And
Okay.
what would you like to say to them that they can do to help you?
Okay, for me, like there's this quote that's like my daily quote by Dr. Martin Luther King that says that our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. So the
Like what?
the day we become silent about things that matter. Yes, so when you see something wrong, don't keep quiet. Speak it out, like say something or do something about it. Get your voice heard, something like that. So because my worst fear is sitting in the future with no trees and then no ocean, no animals, and then my kids ask me, "Mommy, what did you do about this? You saw this was happening, and what did you do?" And not being able to answer that question, it's just gonna, I don't know, I feel like I need to do something, not for myself and for my kids too and my grandchildren. So actually, that's why I'm here. I'm doing something.
How old are you now?
Actually, I'm turning 23 next week. Yes.
Do you think that you are responsible for all the things that are happening at this moment?
For climate change, okay, partly yes, I am, because the things that we do daily, like turning the water tap while you're brushing your teeth, that has an effect. And then you burning emissions using low-grade coal, that's an effect. So everyone like does something. Everyone is guilty. You can't say I'm not guilty. Everyone is guilty. But what we can do is to just identify the things that you do daily and try to minimize your effect from the things that you do every day. So yes, everyone is guilty.
If someone came to you and said, if we change the systems of the world completely
Yes.
to something that is in harmony with nature, would you be welcome that, or would you be resistant to changing your way of life that you have now?
Wow, actually I would love that. I'd love, because the more people we have changing their lifestyle, the better and the faster the restoration of what we have done. So I actually would love that. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Emmanuel Chisalu from Zambia. I work for Supreme Audit Institution, Office of the Auditor General, as a performance and environmental auditor. Basically, my responsibility involves auditing the value for money in terms of how Zambia is managing its natural resources. Sure.
Have you got anything that you've noticed there that's of concern about your natural resources in Zambia?
Most definitely. With the trees, the natural forests that we have. Every year, Zambia loses close to 250,000 to 300,000 hectares of land through deforestation. And that has affected us negatively in terms of rainfall generation in terms of holding soil intactly to avoid soil erosion, and that is mainly contributing to climate change. So it is of concern, and that's the reason why I've packed my bags to get into the forest and ensure that we conduct the forest inventory, ensure that there is monitoring systems operating effectively and efficiently, so that there is sustainable protection of the natural resources that we have.
Can you tell me what is the reason why you deforest the land? What is the land being deforested to do?
All right, it's through population increase. I'll give you an example. 10 years ago, Zambia's population was half the population that we have today, which is 16 million people. Right. So the population has somewhat doubled, and also unsustainable practices of agriculture. There's a system that we call in Zambia Chitemene system, which involves clearing the bush by cutting down trees. You burn them in order for you to make the soil fertile. And also we've got other aspect of whereas people now, their disposable income has increased, and so they're establishing property. So land as well, in terms of land allocation, it has been a challenge. So people have decided to encroach into the forest so that they can start building and constructing their property within the natural forests.
Are they producing good crops from the land under the forest?
I would say yes, but the kind of crops that they're producing is just to sustain them at household level. Yeah.
Do you grow genetically modified grain in Zambia?
No, we don't. Yeah, it's natural maize that usually is being grown by the small-scale maize farmers, because the small-scale maize farmers are the large they dominate the farming industry in Zambia. So they produce about 90% of the harvest that we usually record every year.
Are you having a drought at the moment in Zambia?
No, though it was predicted that we would have a drought due to El Nino in the previous farming season. But what we recorded was a bumper harvest, and what we have in terms of food reserve, it will be able to sustain us for the next 2 years.
What do you put down the fact that Zambia has managed to avoid the drought when the rest of Africa seems to be experiencing it?
Well, what I would say, it's God's grace, because scientists, meteorologists had predicted that we'll have a severe drought. But I was very happy that my president, the current president, His Excellency Edgar Chagwalugu, had called for a national day of prayer, whereas we prayed so that the will of God should prevail against what man is talking about, that we experience drought, there will be severe hunger, and so on and so forth. So definitely the prayers yielded a positive result, and instead of having drought, we had the bumper harvest. Yeah.
Can you tell me, do you use chemicals in your growing of maize, the way that you grow?
Yeah, at the moment, though, we're trying to move away, to shift from that paradigm of using chemicals, because now we understand that the use of chemicals on the soil, one, it disturbs, the biodiversity of small, living things under the soils. So what the agriculturalists are advocating for is use of natural fertilizers, manures. So there's what we call field day extension, where they go and teach small-scale farmers on how to use natural manures instead of using these chemical pesticides, in order for them to kill the weeds or kill the pests that are hovering around their crops.
Do you think this could have had some effect on your managing to go through the drought? Is that your system of agriculture is more suitable for a potential drought?
Yeah, definitely it is. Because there was one way, first of all, they predicted that we'll have this situation, so we were prepared to adapt. And so farmers were being advised to plant drought-resistant crops. So yeah, the drought-resistant crops survived at the midst of minimal rainfall, but later on the rainfall began to increase. So there was information which was given well in advance. Yeah.
What does your group do in where you work? What do they do what are they making happen in Zambia?
All right, our performance and environmental auditors, simply what they do is to go and assess the state of natural resources or how the environment is being managed. For instance, I was conducting the audit which I just concluded, sustainable forest management. I was assessing the tools, how the system is operating in order to protect the forest in a sustainable manner. So basically, we offer checks and balances. If we find out that there's something wrong, we collect those findings, then write to the National Assembly, the policymakers, and tell them that we have experienced or we have noticed such kind of weaknesses within the system of environmental management. And so we give them recommendations on how they can implement the best practices to protect the environment. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And the other kind of natural resources that are not forest, is there people working on that as well too, like your water and your soil?
Yes, definitely. Like this year, we're hoping that we're going to conduct a water audit. We want to see what measures has the government put in place to harvest natural waters which are coming from the rains, so that whenever we're faced with any crisis in terms of a drought, would have more stored within our reserve tanks. Because I'll give you one practical example. Zambia has been affected massively by load shedding due to reduced rainfall. So it has affected our economy in several ways, such that small medium enterprises business, they are limping because they usually receive let's say electricity 8 hours a day, and sometimes off production hours. So you can imagine how someone who depends on feeding his family through welding, metal fabrication, or a salon, and throughout the day they don't have electricity, how are they going to generate that money? So now we want to conduct this audit and advise the government that in case of this eventuality which results into, let's say, maybe load shedding, what other alternatives can we have in place apart from investing into other renewable energy? Can we have more water storages so that when the crisis comes, we are safe? Yeah.
Are you considering going into solar energy?
Yes, we are. Actually, that's a big project and one of the campaign messages which our president had and which saw him assume power again. So we want to move just from dependence on hydro and move on other clean sources of energy such as solar and also geothermal. Yes.
That's good.
Sure.
If you had any advice, if you're talking now to people all over the world,
Yeah.
is there anything that they can do in their lives that will change things for Zambia?
Most definitely. My advice to the people around the world is, first things first. I know our desire to use the natural resources. I know our desire to work on the environment. But let us work on the environment without compromising the needs of the future generation. Alright. So what we need definitely is people to live the environment, to eat the environment, to love the environment. The environment should be part of their identity, such that I don't need to have a tag so that I can go and protect the environment. It's a responsibility of each and every person who's living in this world to protect the environment. If we don't, there will come a day and a time when such kind of beautiful green scenery will no longer exist, because environmental problems are man-induced, and the same environmental problems have got solution from us, the same people who are causing those problems. So let's take care of the environment. When you come to Zambia, don't cut a tree, plant a tree. Sure.
So my name is Megan Simons. I'm a master's student at the University of the Western Cape in the Biodiversity and Conservation Biology Project department. I also am an intern with the Agricultural Research Council. So just to give a little background on myself, my project, or my master's project, mainly focuses on the effects that unplanned wildfires has on the Nosterveld in the Kamiesberg uplands. This is a communal area in the Northern Cape. And the study focuses on the effects that fire also has on Lithropappus and Nocirotis, which is an indigenous perennial to the Nosterveld. I think there's a lot of topics surrounding the Nosterveld in the Western Cape. If we look at the endemics, or if we look at the endangerment of the lowland to Nosterveld, not as much is known about mountain to Nosterveld, even though there's more patches of it in the Northern Cape and it's more pristine in Nosterveld. So for me, it would be, or I'm hoping from my master's project, that I can formulate a fire regime for the Nosterveld in Namaqualand, and then from that we can also look at conserving the Nosterveld in the area. I'm also hoping from this to empower the community members to also extinguish fires. They don't have a fire department in the area, so if we can do some fire training with them as well, with kids as well, this would be really great for the area, and it would be really something that they could do as a community. One of the main causes of the fires would be a harvesting of wild honey in the area. So the kids, they use the erythropeppers, they stoke it, and then they burn, or they'll use the, they'll use the fire and then they'll harvest the honey. They don't know how to extinguish the fires properly. So if we can also train them to harvest the honey sustainably, and I think it's a really good thing that they don't go out and buy honey, they actually harvest it from the veld, which is something good, and I think we should continue with that movement. But if we can also just do some training with the kids and tell them there are ways that we can do this, because they have a bit of background knowledge on the bees and the biodiversity in the area. But if I can go and focus mostly on kids, because that's where my passion lies, with empowering children about awareness on the environment, this is something which is usually lacking within our schooling system. So if I can go out and empower them about environmental education, I think this is one step closer to them living a sustainable environment.
Yeah, when they smoke the bees out, do the bees return to that hive?
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It depends on how big the fire is.
It's quite serious if they don't.
It is a quite serious issue that they have in the area, and most of the school children have admitted that they are offenders of this, but like I mentioned, they don't know how to extinguish it properly.
Okay, one of the problems that we have is that the bees as pollinators is probably their most important function. And the honey is used to feed their young larvae. It has been suggested that it would be a good idea to actually not harvest honey in order to be able to have the bees rather develop and grow in number to become pollinators for the other food crops. What do you think would happen in your area if you were to say that to people?
I don't think they'll be too happy with that suggestion. But for most parts, they would listen. They would either know this is being a big threat to biodiversity or to the conservation of the bees. I can guarantee you harvesting honey would be something of the past then. They would stop immediately. There will be a few offenders, to put it that way, with kids continuously. Okay.
Are you making a latte?
No.
What are you doing?
You want a latte?
No, I don't want noise. So are you going to make a noise? If you do make it, we'll just wait, make it quick, and then I can finish after that. Sorry.
Just keep the warm milk.
Okay, once this is heated, then we'll just carry on. Just wanted to say, I'm going to ask you how much information have you got about the damage that's happening, how the bees are dying out. So you give me as much knowledge as you have about bees, what's happening in any part of the world, because not many people know very much. And I'd like to find out what you know, okay?
About the bees, because my focus is mostly with the Renosterveld.
Can you just, one last vision for the world, what would you say?
I would say living more sustainably as human beings for us. It is to take this country forward, seeing yourself as going green, as I mentioned. It's a cliche, but it's something I want us to really work on. The University of the Western Cape's Cape Flats Nature Reserve got the award for the greenest campus. That is a small initiative, that's something small. If we can in the next 5 years say that the Western Cape is the greenest province in South Africa, and we take that for the next 10 to 15 years, South Africa becomes the greenest country, I can really vision this and see how awesome it would be, and something we can be proud of as a country if we can just educate ourselves, if we can educate our children, if we can tell them about how it is to live sustainably, source everything locally. If there's stuff that you don't need, don't buy it. With soaps, household products, go local, do everything local. We don't need all these commercialized products. I would feel do everything locally, source everything locally, reduce, reuse and recycle. Thank you.
My name is Tobile Kumalo. I'm from the Women's Leadership and Training Program. We work with girls and young women, girls, preteens, teenagers and young women. Preteens are aged from 8 to 12, and teens, it's It's from 11 to 18, and young women from 18 to 35. What we do is we facilitate sessions on climate change and biodiversity and environmental awareness. We are also a women's organization, so we empower women. We have leadership training as well. How we evaluate our work is to see if women take leadership positions in terms of climate change, biodiversity, and environmental awareness. We also have a gardening project where we have about 120 gardeners with their home gardens. The aim of the gardens is also to spread awareness on environmental health and sustainable living. Our gardens are all organic gardens. We don't use any fertilizers or pesticides to maintain them. So everything that we use to maintain the garden is all organic. We also have a citizen science group of girls and boys in terms of biodiversity, because we have a birding club. In that birding club, we also volunteer as citizen scientists to count the number of birds that they are in our place where we live. Yeah.
Where is the place where you live?
We are based in 3 certain different areas. It is Ehlogozi, near High Flats, Guamashu, which is a township, and then Sentokal, near the Drakensberg Mountains.
Are these all in South Africa?
Yes, these are all in South Africa, but in very different places of South Africa. Both are in very deep rural areas, and the other one is in a township. So it is.
Have you been to all 3 areas?
Yes, I have.
Can you describe what they look like for our viewers, please?
Okay. The rural areas, it's deep rural areas. It's houses, rondavels, and a number of houses, and your neighbor is really far away. Yeah. I don't know what kind of description you're looking for.
Okay. Do you find that women at the moment are understanding that they must start to play a bigger role in society?
With the conscientization that we do, women really start to open up and see that it is their time to take responsibility. After all, we do call this planet the Mother Earth. So as Mother Earth, I think we, the women, should take a lot more responsibility at conserving this Mother of ours, Earth.
If you had to outline your vision for the world, what would you like to say that you would see? If you were really powerful and you could make something wonderful happen, how would you see that wonderful thing in terms of the environment?
We promote reducing the use of fossil fuel byproducts. So we are like no fossil fuel. I'm a living example of that. I would say, adapted to climate change or tried myself as a tool for mitigation. I am all natural. I do not need any hair relaxers, artificial hair. I don't use any products that are bio products of fossil fuel. And then we would like everybody else to do that. And we exercise the 7 R's. We have 7. It's reduce, reuse, recycle, repair, re-educate, restore, and refuse. Yes.
Love refuse. Can you explain each one of them?
Okay. Reduce whatever consumptions you are using. What is not necessary, do not use that, because it'll impact in whatever. It'll impact on the global climate change cause and effect. Repair. You do not need to go and buy new things. You can always repair what you have to reduce your consumption levels. re-educate, tell everyone about these things so everyone could be able to practice them, and we could hopefully make an impact on the environment. Reuse. You reuse what you can. Reuse the food that you eat instead of throwing away that lemon that you cut in half and you don't want to use it anymore. Just use it on yourself. Whatever you eat, you can put on your skin. Restore. Restore broken geysers to save water because it's all linked. Restore taps. Restore your old clothes. Instead of chucking it down, just restore it so you can reduce your consumption level. Because if you have to use more, then production will have to be more. And we all know that in production of everything that we use, there is so much of a carbon footprint that is left by all of those things. What is that?
Refuse.
Refuse. Oh, yes, refuse I think is like the most important because you have to refuse and be disciplined in whatever you do. Take notice of what you do. How does it affect you and in the environment?
If you were to imagine a world that is living in harmony with nature, what would you say? How would it be in one sentence or two?
Oh, a world living in harmony with nature. How would it be to describe it?
It's a difficult question.
Yeah, it is. I think it would be a world where people are a lot more enlightened to take notice that we need this environment a lot more than it needs us. We are like a disease, and for us to keep on living on this earth, we need to be aware and to do as much as we can to stop talking about environmental issues but really get down to the work and make sure that we conserve biodiversity, that we have enough trees, at least a house has a home garden. So, yeah.
Anything you want to say?
I'd like to say that I think when people ask me, so you think you yourself can make a difference? I think, yes, I can. If every one of us play our individual roles into help rehabilitating the environment, we could all make a huge difference. We have home phases. Home phases happen in our area where we come and have meetings at least twice a month. We talk about different issues. We talk about climate change. We talk about biodiversity. And the birding group, we have one outing every week. And we have workshops. We hold workshops. 3 workshops a year. We have workshops in January, in June, and in October. So these are 3-day workshops where there are no distractions. We are just here to talk.
Do you think in the areas that you're dealing with, are you seeing it going down?
Yeah.
Or are you seeing it improving?
With the awareness we've done on water so far in our community, because we don't work normally in the community, we work with girls. So in the community, I see people are much more aware. And if you spread that awareness, people start to take notice of what they are doing. So I think it is improving.
How are people affected at the moment by negative things that are going on in the environment? Have you seen that?
I've seen what my community has to go through because they had no idea of the impacts that they would cause by dumping in our nearby stream. And now with all the crisis that is happening in Durban, I feel like us picking up, because every stream leads to every river, and every river leads to a certain leads to Umgene River, which is a dam, which is where we get our water source. And not many people know that. So now they are much more aware, and we have stream pickups with the community and the girls. Doing that sparks something in them to not litter or spread awareness on littering in the streams and rivers.
I spent the last 3 or so years trying to understand what this vague, fuzzy notion of food security means. It's such an umbrella term, but what does this actually mean? And I decided to not look at it from the perspective of the farmer, because we hear about that all the time. What are farmers producing? What's happening with land reform? These kinds of things. I wanted to understand what was happening for 60% of South Africans who now live within the city, who are very far removed from the soil that gives us our spaghetti bolognese and our glass of Coke and our chicken sandwich or our Greek salad. I spent 18 months driving a desk, trawling through loads of literature from the scientific community. I spent 3 months on the road, driving around cities and visiting people around South Africa. And then I spent 9 months disappearing into that strange existential cave that you have to go into when you write. And what I produced was The Hungry Season, Feeding Southern Africa's Cities, which was launched recently. I discovered a number of things during this process, which obviously I can't go into all of it right now, but a couple of things became very evident. The first thing is that food security from the perspective of the city dweller, you and me, is not about whether or not there's enough food around. There's plenty of food around. It's about how you and I access that food, and it's about the choices we make when we do have that food. The other thing I discovered, which was quite alarming, is that the city does make us fat and sick. A lot of these statistics won't be that new to you. In South Africa, 55% of all adults are either overweight or obese. And there's absolutely no judgment in that. I spent most of my own adult life on the softer side of my ideal goal weight, so we all know what it's like to struggle with these kinds of things. But the truth is that we are getting fatter, and this is mirroring what's happening in the developed world, where we've seen skyrocketing obesity rates since the 1970s. And of course with this comes sickness. In South Africa, the related diseases, such as diabetes, heart disease, certain cancers associated with being overweight, the cumulative effects of these chronic lifestyle-related illnesses are now becoming a greater risk to our health as a country than the traditional bad ones like HIV and TB, the communicable diseases. And interestingly enough, even in the developed world, and we'll probably see the same happening here, this kind of obesity rate is starting to reverse some of the life expectancy gains that have been made through modern medicine in the past century or so. So what precisely is going on? Well, there's a huge body of literature that looks at why we're getting fat and sick when we move to the city, but it's not a very empathetic literature. And what I try to do with the book is to find real stories of real people to explain our relationship with food and what that means from a sustainability perspective. So what happens? We move to the city and we abandon the peasant foods that we used to live off when we were in rural areas. And I know that it sounds like there's a value judgment there, and it's a very real one, because there are very profound, powerful cultural reasons why we want to abandon the food that we traditionally associate with our culture. We move to the city and we want to eat aspirational foods. We want to eat KFC and Wimpy burgers. We don't want to appear to be poor and rural anymore. The food that's available to us in the city is highly processed. We take in less fibre, less fresh fruit and veg. We increase our fat and salt and sugar intake. We eat more pasta. We eat these strange novel foods that we find in the supermarket shelves. And a lot of this is very cheap, very energy-dense food that is available just like that. We don't have to hunt down our food anymore. We don't have to run great miles to get our food. We don't have to burn any calories to get it. We just pop down to the 7-Eleven, exchange a bit of cash, and we're ripping into a bag of Doritos. So why are we eating these foods? Well, there's a wonderful little vox pop that came up in the National Planning Commission's Vision 2030 document, which was released recently. It's a story of a woman who explains how much time she spends every day traveling to and from work. She lives in Alex, and she travels through into central Joburg every day. The number of hours she spends commuting is vast. She ends up spending almost half of her wage on transport. At the end of the day, there isn't much money or time left to go shopping, to think about preparing food, to cook it up slowly, to sit down at the table, to eat it with her children. And this is typical of what the modern urban lifestyle is doing to us. More of us in the family are entering the workplace so that we can earn money. That means we're cutting the tether that we had with the kitchen and that slow social communal relationship that we had with both the family and the food. So we're now eating on the trot, we're foraging as we go through the city, and the food that is available to us, because this food has to have a long shelf life, because it's very far from the soil that produced it, it tends to be highly processed and low in nutrition. So the other thing is that this food is highly, highly addictive. We don't like to admit this, but it really is. And I think we're going to start to see fast food and sugary foods as treated, well, basically it's the next tobacco. Sugar in particular, I think, is the next tobacco. This is highly addictive food. And the other thing, of course, is that this vast, sprawling city, and we heard our speaker earlier talking about how it pushes us off our feet and into motorized transport. It's much harder to move safely in a city like this. In fact, 3 weeks ago, I watched a young man dying at an intersection. A very ordinary suburban street down in Claremont area. Turned out he was 22 years old and he was delivering pizzas, probably to fund a study of sorts. And he just connected at the wrong moment with a BMW. And half an hour before that, while I was drinking my coffee at Vida Cafe, a young man alive, his entire life before him. Maybe the chance of having kids, learning Spanish, traveling into Namaqualand, his entire life lay ahead of him, and then just like that, his motorcycle connected with a car, and every memory of the 5-year-old that stubbed his toe or the 10-year-old that climbed a tree just started fading away as the paramedics worked his chest and tried to get oxygen to his brain, and they couldn't. Now, this is the city that we live in. It's not safe to move on 2 wheels. Obviously, he was motorized, but cyclists and runners, it's not safe to move around on the roads. We have to completely rethink the way our cities operate. And in poorer communities, it's just not safe to step outside of the house in many respects. You hear so many stories of kids who get home from school at the end of the day. The parent, if a parent is home, will lock them basically inside their lounge, and that's where they'll stay for the rest of the day, because it's not safe to run out in the streets. And that's, particularly for young girls, for instance, has repercussions for their bone strength later in life. All these little things we don't think about. The obesity in the city, is in the developing world city, is a peculiar one. It's unusual. It links to an invisible hunger problem, because we are poor in many respects, but we have access to highly energy-dense, nutrient-poor food that's very, very cheap. And it drives out the immediacy of hunger without necessarily giving us our long-term nutritional requirements. So we can bulk up on these foods and get fat, but at the same time, we are malnourished at a micronutrient level. And this is peculiar to the developing world, and is increasingly hitting the radar of organizations like the World Health Organization and UNICEF and so many of these organizations that are worried about how we have this double burden of disease now in poorer communities, because people now have the chronic lifestyle-related illnesses associated with being overweight, but then they are also malnourished at micronutrient level, which compromises the immune system and has all sorts of other implications. So there's an interesting discussion that goes on around this. In the old days, in fact, until fairly recently, this problem of gaining weight was seen as the problem of the individual. If you get too heavy, it's because you're fat and you're gluttonous. And here I'm using the language of the scientific literature. I'm not putting any value judgments in that at all. But now the scientists are saying we actually need to step back from this and take a new look at this problem. Yes, this doesn't mean that the individual must not take responsibility for their choices. And Ian's talk was wonderful in that it shows certain very primal drivers behind why we think and do and behave in the way that we do. Now the scientific community is saying we need to look at this modern urban life. This habitat that we roam in every day couldn't be further removed from the savannas where we once chased down ungulates in order to get meat. It couldn't be further removed. So now they're saying it's time to, well, this rising obesity rate, they're saying, is the normal response of normal people to an abnormal environment. They're saying that the modern urban landscape makes it too easy to make the wrong health lifestyle choices and too hard to make the right ones. So how do we fix the problem? Well, hopefully that's what many of you will be thinking about, because we have to change the city space that we live in, how we move in it, how we relate to food in it, the kinds of food that's available to us in it. But there's something else that I want to focus on specifically today, and that is the idea that the fast food industry has had unfettered access to us as a market for too long. The fast food industry is only required to get safe food to us. It's not required to get healthy food to us. So I think that it's time to start applying the principle that comes from environmental law of the polluter pays. If you're mining a mine and you pollute a wetland, you are required to then cover the cost of mopping up the damage, cleaning the wetland. I think it's time to start looking at the industrial food processes and the fast food industry in particular as a polluter of the nutritional landscape, because they've been accessing our markets, feeding us addictive food, getting us sick, but then the state has to mop up the damage by paying for the medical costs of so many people who then require insulin for diabetes, various medications to deal with high cholesterol, etc., etc. So how about finding a way to get the polluter to pay to clean up some of the nutritional damage that is being caused to our country? And the other thing is to protect our children. Again, referring back to Ian's talk about the development of the brain, teenagers and children and young adults are particularly vulnerable, not only to the addictive nature of these foods, but to the marketing messages that are being sent out by the fast food industry. So youngsters are still very much driven by the limbic system in the brain. It's an impulse-driven brain. It wants immediacy, it wants satisfaction right now. It hasn't developed the strong frontal adult brain that only really matures at the age of 5 onwards, where you develop executive function and you can think long-term and you can plan long-term and you can deal with the immediacy of your drive to buy that junk food right now. So we need to think of ways of protecting our kids from this, what the scientific literature is saying is a very predatory nature of the fast food industry, both in terms of how it pushes food at us and the way it produces the foods. I really